Alright, let's dive into the world of Assassin's Creed today. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and you know those 9 Templar targets we take down as Altair? Well, let's just say they're quite the colorful bunch. Each of them has their own little quirks, wild ambitions, and of course their fair share of paranoia. So I thought, why not rank them based on their personalities and backstories? Because honestly, some of these guys are something else. Now don't get me wrong, each one of them is essential in their own right, but hey, not everyone can be at the top, right? Some are just better villains than others. And that is what we are going to break down today, my personal ranking of the 9 targets, from the least intriguing to the most complex. So buckle up and let's take a walk through the Holy Land, one target at a time. Starting with number 9, we have got the black market dealer Tamir. So, Tamir, where do I even start with this guy? I mean, to be honest, out of all the targets, Tamir feels the least impactful. He is just kind of there, you know. Now, don't get me wrong, he is still dangerous in his own way. But compared to the others, his role in the Grand Templar scheme feels pretty small to me. From what I have gathered, Tamir was mainly focused on arms dealing, specifically to fuel the Crusades. His contribution to the Templars was helping keep the war going by providing weapons to anyone who could pay. So yeah, pretty straightforward stuff. He is making sure there are enough swords and shields to keep both sides fighting. But what I really did not like about him is how ruthless he was. Tamir did not care who he was dealing with or how many lives were lost as a result of his business.
This is business!
I mean, the guy would kill someone just for trying to haggle prices down. Seriously, it's like, come on man, you are already profiting off war, but you can't stand losing a few coins. That's cold. And honestly, that's why he's at the bottom of the list for me. Tamir was greedy, power-hungry and completely selfish. He did not have any grand vision or higher purpose like the other targets. His role in the Templars was just about profit, making sure he lined his own pockets while keeping the conflict alive. In my opinion, that makes him the least interesting of the bunch. But hey, at least Altair took care of him quickly. So yeah, for me, he is an easy pick for last place. Next up at number 8, we have got Talal. This guy is an interesting one, but not in the best way. He is definitely not as upfront as Tamir. In fact, Talal is a bit more sneaky with what he's got going on, and that's what makes him dangerous. So, Talal's whole deal was human trafficking. Yeah, he ran a whole network of capturing and selling people into slavery, which, yeah, already puts him on a whole other level of despicable.
What?
He was helping the Templars by providing them with manpower, whether it was labor, soldiers, or just people to exploit for their various schemes. He was not just some petty criminal either. He had a system in place. He organized the capture of people from all over, and his clients were the ones waging wars or needing workers for Templar plans. In short, he was supplying the Templars with the muscle they needed to push their agenda forward. Now, what is kind of unsettling about Talal is how he saw himself as a savior figure. Yeah, he legit thought he was doing people a favor by enslaving them, claimed it was better for them to live under his control than to be caught up in the chaos of the crusade. I mean, the logic is messed up, right? But in his mind, it was almost like he thought he was sparing them from a worse fate. In a way, I can see why Templars used him. He was not just about brute force, he was strategic, knew how to manipulate situations, and he had that twisted ideology backing him. But for me, that twisted belief is why he ranks so low in the list. I mean, sure, his operations were pretty significant, but his reasoning was just so warped. I don't know, the guy's worldview was just off. He thought he was doing the right thing, but all I see is someone who exploited people for personal gain.
I understood that reference.
He was not about grand visions like some of the others. He just used people as tools. So yeah, Talal definitely is a bad news, but not quite on the level of the bigger players in the Templar game. At number 7, I have placed Abul Nakud. This guy, man, where do I start? If Talal was all sneaky and in the shadows, Abul was the exact opposite. The guy was flashy. I mean, we are talking about a man who lived in a literal palace, throwing lavish parties and indulging in luxury while the people of Damascus suffered. And trust me, that's a big part of why he is on this list. Now, Abul was the wealthy merchant of Damascus, and he was really vocal about his hatred for the people, like openly mocking them. He despised them for being, well, in his words, stupid and weak.
I'm surrounded by idiots.
This guy had a real superiority complex. He believed himself to be above everyone else, and he was not shy about it. He openly criticized the Crusades and Saladin's regime, calling it all a waste of time and resources. But here's the kicker. While he seemed like he was just some rich guy who didn't care about the world around him, he was actually working with the Templars to fund their plans. He had this twisted view that the only way to bring peace to the world was through chaos. Yeah, he legit thought that by making things worse, like really bad, economically and socially, people would have no choice but to turn to someone like him, someone wise enough to rule. And who was backing this idea?
I don't know.
You guessed it, the Templars. Abul was their financier, helping fuel their operations by funneling money into their courts. I mean, the Templars needed resources, right? And this guy was basically their piggy bank. But here's where Abul gets a bit more complex. Unlike Talal, who seemed to genuinely believe he was doing the right thing, I'm not entirely sure about Abul bought into the Templar ideology at all. I think for him it was more about staying in power. He was not motivated by Templars' grand vision of control or their desire for order. Nope, this guy was out for himself, plain and simple.
I did it for me. I liked it.
He saw his alliance with the Templars as a means to an end, to make sure he stayed on the top while everyone else suffered. He threw one last grand party thinking he was untouchable, but then Altair happened. You know the drill. Abul's arrogance was his undoing. His death to me was kind of a poetic justice. The guy who lived in luxury, thinking he was untouchable, ended up falling just like everyone else. So yeah, Abul Naqud, the rich arrogant merchant who thought he could buy his way to power, but at the end of the day, money could not save him. And for me, that's why he's a little higher than Talal. He played a bigger role in funding the Templar operations, but it was all just about him. So, at number 6, we have got Sibran. Now this guy has got a lot going on. He is probably one of the most paranoid figures on this list. And honestly, who can blame him? When you are a Templar Grand Master who is part of a secret world domination plot and an assassin is out there hunting you, I would be on edge too.
No. Wait. Wait.
Sibran was the head of the newly founded Teutonic Knights in Acre, which means he had a lot of responsibility. This guy was overseeing the port, and let me tell you, he took his job very seriously. Maybe a little too seriously. He started obsessing over security, doubling patrols, freaking out over the smallest threats, and generally spiraling into the mess of anxiety. He thought danger was lurking around every corner, and you know what?
No! God, please, no! No!
He was right, but still not a great look for a leader. Sibran's main contribution to the Templars was that he was all in on the idea of using the navy to block any outside help to the Holy Land. Basically, he wanted to control the seas, stopping kings and queens from sending reinforcements to the region. So he was not just some paranoid guy hiding in a tower. He had a major role in the Templars' grand plan. He was about to launch a naval blockade to cut off support for both sides, which in the Templars' eyes would have helped them seize control. Now, here's the thing about Sibran. In the beginning, he was not always like this. He was a respected warrior, a skilled sportsman, and even a leader who could command authority. But by the time Altair found him, the guy had lost it. His paranoia had completely taken over. He was seeing enemies anywhere, and yeah, when someone is that far gone, it's only a matter of time before they slip up. What really stuck with me is the way he died. When Altair finally caught up to him, Sibran was out on his ship, just firing arrows in every direction, yelling at birds and civilians alike.
You could not live with your own failure.
It was kind of sad in a way. He had built up this terrifying image of the assassins in his mind. He saw them as this unstoppable force that was always just around the corner waiting to strike. And in the end, that fear consumed him.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
To me, Sibran's story is one of how fear can destroy you from the inside out. He might have been one of the most powerful Templars in terms of military strength and influence, but his paranoia made him weak. He was not fighting for the Templar cause anymore. He was just fighting to survive another day. Moving forward, at number 5, we have got Garnier de Naples. Now here is a guy who is complicated. On one hand, he sees himself as a healer, but on the other, well, he is basically running what is very much a medieval torture clinic.
Shut up!
Let me explain. Garnier was the Grand Master of the Knights Hospitaller, and on paper, the guy's job was all about providing medical care. That's the whole purpose of the Hospitallers, right? They help the sick, they treat the wounded, but Garnier took this concept and twisted it into something far darker. In his mind, he was not just treating illnesses, he was curing what he saw as the weakness of the mind. And yeah, that sounds noble at first, but Garnier's methods, not so much. See, Garnier was capturing people off the streets of Acre. Many of them were just mentally ill or physically deformed, and he would lock them up in his hospital. But instead of giving them care, he would experiment on them. He believed he could fix them, almost like they were broken objects that needed repair. And I get it, he probably thought he was doing the right thing. But when you start locking people away against their will and subjecting them to painful inhuman procedures, yeah, you have definitely crossed a line there. As far as his role in the Templar cause, Garnier's hospital was more than just a place for treatment. It was part of the Templars' grand plan to bring about peace through control. They thought by fixing people's minds, they could make them compliant. If everyone thought the same way, then no one would resist, right? Garnier's contribution was all about molding people to fit that vision, one person at a time. He thought he was helping the Templars create a world where no one would suffer, because in his mind, suffering came from free will and individual thought. And as for his personality, Garnier was unsettling. He was cold and distant, which kind of makes sense if you are running experiments on people. Like he genuinely believed that what he was doing was justified. I think that's what makes him so disturbing. He did not see himself as a villain. In his mind, he was the solution to the chaos of the world, and the people who could not see that were just too sick to understand. When Altair confronted him, Garnier did not even try to run. He stayed in his hospital fully prepared to die because he was so convinced that his work would continue without him. His final words to Altair were about how the world needs structure and discipline, and how in his eyes he was giving people a chance at a better life.
I'm the solution.
But honestly, at that point he was just too far gone. The guy could not see that he had become the very thing he thought he was fighting against, an oppressor. Next up at number 4, we have got William of Montferrat. Now, William is an interesting one because his whole deal is all about control. This guy was not messing around when it came to running things with an iron fist.
I'm good at this.
He was the regent of Acre and was basically put in charge by King Richard while the king was off fighting in the Crusades. So William had a lot of power and he loved it. You know what's interesting about William? He did not pretend to be a good guy. He was straightforward, almost blunt in his methods. He believed in strict rule, and in his mind, order and control were necessary for a prosperous kingdom.
Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Sounds reasonable, right? But William took it to the extreme. He thought that in order to maintain control, the common people needed to be kept in check constantly. He did not trust anyone, especially not the poor. He saw them as a threat to stability, like they were always one step away from rebelling. So naturally, he imposed some seriously harsh measures to keep them in line. Heavy taxes, punishments for any form of disobedience, and just an overall authoritarian vibe. In William's view, people didn't know what was best for them, and so they needed to be ruled. He was all about taking away their freedom to ensure peace. Kind of a classic Templar mindset, right? The idea that people can't be trusted with free will, so the only way to bring about peace is through total control. And William was definitely a Templar through and through. His contribution to their goals, maintaining stability in Acre, making sure that the people were under his thumb, and that the Templar plans could move forward without any hiccups. Now what makes William stand out to me is how unapologetically he pursued his goals. He was not like some of the other targets who tried to hide their darker side or justify their actions in some moral framework. He was straight up about wanting power and keeping control. You have to give him credit for his honesty, I guess. He was not pretending to be something he was not.
That's what good leaders do.
Personality-wise, William was brash, proud, and pretty damn arrogant. He did not believe anyone who could touch him, especially not some assassin. When Altair confronted him, William did not back down. He was completely confident that his soldiers and his fortress would protect him. And like a true military man, he fought until the bitter end, using every tactic he had at his disposal. But in the end, Altair was just better. His final words, oh man, they are what you would expect. He did not apologize, did not try to justify himself really. Instead, he doubled down, telling Altair that that would not change anything, that the world needed strong leaders like him to survive. I mean, this guy genuinely believed that he was the glue holding Acre together, and without him, everything would fall apart.
I am inevitable.
So why does William rank 4th for me? Well, it's because of his no-nonsense approach to power. He did not waste time pretending to be a savior or someone fighting for the greater good. He believed in power and control, plain and simple. He is not as nuanced as some of the others, but his sheer conviction and the ruthlessness with which he maintained his rule is what stands out. At number 3, we have got Majaddin. Now, this guy is intense. He was the Saracen regent of Jerusalem, and unlike some of the other targets, Majaddin was completely obsessed with power, but not in the usual I want control sense.
Okay.
He was more about fear. For Majaddin, it was not enough to just rule. He wanted people to be terrified of him, and boy, did he succeed. Majaddin was not the type of leader who thought, how can I make things better? Nope. His philosophy was, how can I make people fear me so much that they won't even think about stepping out of line? He would publicly execute anyone who even slightly opposed him. And these were not just any executions. They were brutal, designed to send a message to the people of Jerusalem. This is what happens if you dare defy Majuddin.
Stop it. Get some help.
It is funny or maybe ironic that a guy so fixated on maintaining control through fear was actually pretty insecure. He was constantly worried that he didn't have enough control, which is why he was so heavy-handed with his punishments. In his mind, the only way to stop people from rebelling was to make them too scared to even try.
Fear me if you dare.
Now, in terms of his contribution to the Templars, Majuddin was instrumental in keeping Jerusalem under their influence. By ruling with an iron fist, he made sure that the Templars' plan could move forward without any interruptions from the people. His public executions were not just about keeping control, they were about quelling any possibility of revolt before it even started. Essentially, he was the guy who made sure that Jerusalem was locked down, creating an environment where the Templars could work their magic behind the scenes. But you know, as much as Majuddin was feared, there is something else about him that stood out to me. His cruelty was not just a means to an end. He seemed to enjoy it.
Look at him suffer.
When you think of some of the other Templars like William or Garnier, they justified their actions as necessary for peace or order. But with Majuddin, he did not really have that moral framework. He did not need to justify anything because in his mind he was all about that. He enjoyed watching people suffer. He thrived on it. When Altair confronted him, Majuddin was in the middle of another public execution. But what is wild is that even in his last moments, Majuddin didn't flinch. He was so consumed by his belief that fear would protect him that he did not even consider that he could be the one to die that day. His arrogance was off the charts and it was kind of his downfall. He did not believe Altair would actually kill him because in his twisted mind, fear was the ultimate shield. So, why is Majuddin ranked third? Well, in my view, it is his complete dedication to his warped ideology of fear and control. While others had more complex motivations, Majuddin was pretty simple. He wanted absolute power and he did not care how he got it. His cruelty, his arrogance, and the way he ruled Jerusalem made him one of the most memorable targets for me. Moving on to number 2, we have got Jubair al-Hakim. Jubair is one of the most complex targets in this lineup. If Majuddin was all about fear, Jubair was about something else entirely. Knowledge. Or more accurately, the destruction of it.
I'll destroy everything and everyone.
Jubair was the chief scholar of Damascus. And you would think that a man in that position would be all about preserving and spreading knowledge, right? I mean, scholars are supposed to love books and learning, but not Jubair. This guy took a complete 180. He went from being a protector of knowledge to leading a full-on war against it. You know, the more I think about it, the more I realize that Jubair's story is actually kind of tragic. In his mind, the world was being corrupted by these ancient texts. These books that he believed were spreading lies, sowing hatred, and fueling wars. He saw the Crusades as being caused by the words of men long dead. And he genuinely thought that by burning all these texts, he could cleanse society and free people from their ignorance.
And there seems to be no sign of intelligent life.
It is a classic case of road to hell being paved with good intentions. But here is the thing. As much as Jubair thought he was doing the right thing, his methods were, well, they were extreme. He was not just burning books, he was turning his followers into zealots. He convinced the other scholars of Damascus to hunt down and destroy all knowledge, philosophy, science, religion, everything. If it was written down, it had to go. And if anyone dared to stand in his way, he had no problem eliminating them. Now that brings me to Jubair's contribution to the Templars. At first glance, it might seem like he was just a madman bent on destruction, but his actions actually aligned pretty well with the Templars' goals. The Templars wanted control, and Jubair's destruction of knowledge played right into that. By wiping out the intellectual foundations of society, he was paving the way for the Templars to impose their own order, a new world where they would decide what people could know and think. But here is the catch. Jubair was not just a pawn. He truly believed in what he was doing. He thought he was saving people from themselves, that by erasing the past, he was freeing them to think for themselves. I guess in a twisted way, he saw himself as a liberator. But in reality, he was just taking away people's freedom to learn, to question, to grow. It is one thing to destroy physical weapons, but Jubair was burning the tools that allow people to fight ignorance and oppression. And that's what makes him so dangerous. When Altair finally tracked Jubair down, it was not some quick assassination. Altair had to pick him out from a group of his followers because they all dressed the same. And that's fitting because by the end, Jubair had become a faceless zealot, just like the men who followed him. His final words were almost haunting. He still believed he was doing the right thing, burning the books, freeing the people. He could not see that in his quest to destroy ignorance, he had become its greatest agent. And that's why Jubair ranks so high for me. He was not just another power-hungry villain. He was a man with ideals, even if they were twisted beyond recognition. His descent from scholar to zealot is what makes him one of the most tragic and terrifying targets on the list. And finally, at number 1 place, we have got Robert the Sable. Robert was not just another Templar, he was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. If we are talking about villains with influence, power and a grand vision, Robert the Sable is in a league of his own. From the get-go, you can tell Robert is not just playing games. He has got his hands on everything: military, politics, religion, and he is a master manipulator. We are talking about a guy who could win over King Richard himself, convince him to trust him, all while secretly plotting his own rebellion.
Because it's all part of the plan.
That kind of power and charisma, that's not something you see in every target. Now here's the thing with Robert. Unlike some of the other Templars who are more localized in their ambitions, like Tamir or Garnier, Robert's got a global vision. The guy was not interested in just controlling a city or two. He wanted to use Apple of Eden to control all of humanity.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Bring about this new world order where free will has a thing of the past. I mean, sure, some of the others had similar goals, but Robert, he's the one pulling the strings. But here's where Robert gets really interesting to me. He's not just another power-hungry tyrant. In his mind, what he's doing is for the greater good. He truly believes that peace can only come if you take away people's ability to make their own choices.
It's a price I'm willing to pay.
For him, the cost of freedom is too high. Wars, corruption, endless conflict. So from his point of view, using the Apple of Eden to control people would bring peace, stability and order to a world that in his eyes is constantly teetering on chaos. And in a twisted way, I get where he's coming from. I mean, we live in a world that is far from perfect, right? People do make bad choices all the time, and those choices often lead to suffering. But the thing is, Robert's solution, sacrifice free will for peace, well, that's just too extreme. It's like, how far are you willing to go for this so-called peace? And what's the point of peace if no one is free to live their lives, make their mistakes and grow from them?
There is no good and evil. There is only power.
Now let's not forget his contribution to the Templar. Robert was not just our leader, he was the mastermind behind much of their long-term strategy. He is the one who helped orchestrate the Crusades in a way that furthered Templar influence, creating chaos so the Templars could swoop in with their solutions. He even had a secret plan to get Crusaders and Saracens to both defect to the Templar cause, which is insane if you think about it. He wanted to unite both sides under his control, using the chaos of war to his advantage. But what really makes Robert stand out to me is how close he came to winning. When Altair faces him at Arsuf, it's not just some standard duel. Altair is not just taking out another corrupt noble or greedy merchant. This is a fight against the guy who almost toppled the Assassin Brotherhood, who was inches away from using the Apple of Eden to reshape the world. And even in the end, Robert was not going down without a fight.
No man can kill me.
He was a fierce warrior, strong, skilled, and able to hold his own against Altair. He was not just a mastermind sitting behind the scenes. He was a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield too. And those final moments when Robert tells Altair that Al-Mualim was a secret Templar, that's when it all comes together. Robert had the vision, the strategy, the power, and he almost had it all. His greatest weapon was not even the app. It was the truth about Altair's own mentor. So yeah, hands down, Robert the Sable takes the top spot for me. He was not just another piece on the Templar chessboard. He was the one moving the pieces, shaping the game, and coming dangerously close to checkmate. So there you have it. That's my breakdown of the 9 targets from the original Assassin's Creed. Each one with their own story, their own beliefs, and their own role in the Grand Templar scheme. It's crazy when you look back at how different all these men were, yet they were united by a common goal, whether it was control, power, or in some twisted way, peace. They each shaped the world around them, sometimes for better, but mostly for worse. And that's what makes Assassin's Creed so fascinating to me. It's not just about Parker, hidden blades, and stealth kills. So let's be real, that's a big part of fun. It's about the depth behind each character, their motivations, their flaws, and how Altair fits into all of it as he unravels the truth. If there is one thing that I have learned from this journey, it is that the line between good and evil can be surprisingly blurry. The Assassins and the Templars both believe they are fighting for what is right, but at what cost? Free will, control, order, chaos. It's all a delicate balance. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Assassin's Creed as much I did putting it together. I would love to hear what you think. Who's your most memorable target? Do you agree with my ranking, or maybe you see things differently? Either way, thanks for sticking around. And remember,
Nothing is true.
Nothing is true.
Nothing is true.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.